Great to see you. Thank you for joining me here. Would love if you can just to introduce yourself, and I can introduce myself as well.
Yeah, Brian Gregory, CTO at 66 Degrees. I've been here for 7 months now. Came by way of Google after 8 years there.
And Ben Kessler, CEO, thanks for joining me, and really looking forward to diving in a few different topics today.
Yeah.
So Agentic Enterprise, data estate, what differentiates Google, what differentiates 66. So Brian, at 66, we spend a lot of time with our customers helping them build the Agentic Enterprise, where humans and agents operate to build the enterprise of the future. As you look at our customers and customers that approach us, how close are people to having the Agentic Enterprise?
Yeah, I think, the reality is we're kind of in this like future state where people believe in the future and what that might be, and then the reality of what we're seeing. I think last I looked, I think 70% of enterprises have an Agentic Enterprise strategy or a direction they're going. But then when you look, 1 out of 10 agentic opportunities that they work on is successful, right? So there's clearly a gap between reality and then what your vision might be at this stage. But I don't think there's anyone that doesn't believe in it and see it's coming, and it's going to be something that they're going to have to deal with going forward. So it's like, how do we address that? It's not a science experiment, but they're also not where they need to be to kind of accelerate that journey yet.
It sounds like a lot of opportunity out there. If you looked at organizations that have succeeded in beginning to develop and deploy agents, and really, even if you take a step back, overall AI strategy, is it luck that where organizations are succeeding, or is it actually very intentional strategy that's driving the success?
Well, I would say, I don't think it's luck. I would say there was some luck in the fact that I don't think people knew where it was going, right? And so if you think of what the foundational blocks were, is if you were building an AI solution, a point solution to solve for one complex problem, then that was a good thing, right? You could argue that those were science experiments or POCs, and is AI really going to be a thing? If we're going back years ago, and even a couple of years ago for that matter. And then if you think of building these one-offs, and there's great, they're valuable for the organization, but now you've got the agentic framework that comes in. So now you can start to have agents talking to agents. So now you can actually start to group things together. They're solving for this problem, but then you realize, well, I can add this value and do this over here, which changes it. And so that's where you're really starting to hit the accelerator, because you have been playing with it. You have been trying things to solve single point solutions, but now you're actually able to put them together. And then that's where I would argue the magic starts to occur, versus being flat-footed. I've done nothing in the AI world, nor have I tried it, and have I been successful. And that's what I would say is where I'm seeing people kind of have more of a leg up, because they were already thinking that way. They just didn't realize there's a multiplier effect that they can add on to it.
Yeah, I agree. And many of the clients that we encounter is they're at least thinking about it. And I think thinking about it is a lot of the battle, and then having a strategy. Now, what if you encounter a client that is on the other side of the fence?
Yeah. That
this client doesn't have a strategy,
right?
Hasn't implemented any POCs, but they've come to the realization that to say, hey, there's going to be winners and losers in each industry if we look out over a few next years, and those that do have agents and an AI strategy I believe will win.
Yeah.
How would you advise that customer? Where do they begin to start thinking about this if they haven't done anything yet?
Yeah, I think, I'll use a personal experience. So my life before Google, I was at a Fortune 12 healthcare company, and I made the mistake of thinking we can go do all of these things. We're just going to build out said solutions. We're going to go build these new capabilities for our consumers and patients in this experience. And the reality is it's a lot tougher than you think, right? Because you realize data's siloed, and you're going, well, all of our core systems are all internal, mainframe, Teradata's, Oracle's, you name it. And you also realize you're not really set up for cloud native thinking, I'll call it back then, which is we're going to do iterative release cycles, and you've got, a 10-day cab review. Well, that doesn't really work together. Mm-hmm. So I would say it's fast forward, it's the same exact thing. You've got isolated data systems where you need access to that data, because you can't really do a lot with AI unless you're having access to said data. So how is that exposable via API or other? And it's not that you have to say, you can't have a mainframe. That might be your system of record, but you have to have AI-enabled data. I'll call it clean data. You're only as good at, you hear this in every theme, is that you're only as good as your data.
Yep.
It doesn't change when you go to the AI world. So I would say that's the most important, is that they start thinking that way. Because you could have all these dreams and then you start to realize, well, we're not getting the outputs we expected, nor are we monetizing our data in the way that we should, because it's not available to us to consume.
That's really, really helpful. And so let me play back to you what I'm understanding here. And so it's, in order to start, the agentic enterprise journey, you have to get your data in place first. And so how would a company go about that? So I'm a legacy organization, and I have, I'm either co-located or actually have on-premise where my data and applications are stored. I know that the cloud will likely give me better access to AI and start to transform my organization. What is step one in modernizing that data and cloud estate?
Yeah, so the wonderful thing today is, if you'd asked me 2 years ago, I would have a very different answer of where we were in the industry. And I speak collectively as in technology advances. You didn't have the insights. And going back to my previous life, I had 200 DBAs responsible for all of our core systems. When we had an outage, there was like 3 or 4 people that actually understood the systems that I could go to troubleshoot an outage. We didn't understand the code logic, what it did. You had stuff that was written, COBOL, previous life, people were no longer there, millions of lines of code. And so you're like, well, how would you think about even trying to modernize that or migrate that or other, or how would you even get access to said data? With Google's coming out with the mainframe assessment tool or COD-Mod. It's giving you insights now. You're using Gemini to give you insights on how many lines of your code are actually executed. What is the code triggers? What are they actually doing? So it makes you get that confidence. It doesn't give you all the answers. It gives you the confidence, like maybe I could kind of go solve and figure this out. As you and I know, is that working with you in my previous life at Google, you guys built out the next leg of that journey, right? So at 66 degrees, you took the outputs that were magical and great, all these insights on your data, but then it took those as inputs and did the next leg of the journey, which would be, if, again, no one was thinking 2 years ago that you would now be able to automatically create, the validation test, the regression tests, and check out code that you need that says, no, I'm doing this not on what a person told me the code's supposed to do. It's actually what the code's supposed to do. Okay. And then put those automatically in Jira and do that. So I think that's where now we're seeing that we're able to modernize. We're able to use AI to help accelerate that, to give confidence, to be clear. It's not doing all of the work. Yes, it does a lot of the refactoring and shows you what it looks like in different languages, but it's more about like your business logic. You can see it. And then you can also see it working. We've taken applications and actually taken them from the mainframe and then promoted them to Google Cloud and had them working functional, and then the customers can touch and feel their application, go, this is working exactly as I expected. That's giving that confidence and enabling that to be unlocked and available.
So what it sounds like is it's actually not too late. If I haven't started this, and actually haven't started thinking about agentic AI and haven't started thinking about modernizing my data and application stack,
right?
I could actually accelerate some of that, or some of the latest advances that would allow me to accelerate that right now.
Yes, and going back to, 2 years ago, we couldn't have had this conversation. It's a new era that we're in, and this is one of the wonderful things about AI is that we're learning what it's actually capable of doing, and it's solving legacy complex problems. And allowing you to modernize your data and code and make choices. Honestly, it's not about getting off of something. It's about how do you actually want to decouple the data? Where do you want this to live? Do you want it to live in the cloud? But it's really, you can't do AI without data. So it unlocks that oil, if you will. And that's the most important thing. So, using the tooling that we have, it's like you can do things now you couldn't do previously.
That's awesome. That's it's actually a really exciting time, and especially exciting for those that have started to adopt AI.
Yeah.
And it's even exciting for those that haven't adopted AI. Would you sequence this in any way? So I haven't done anything. I know I need to modernize my data. Can you start to run some AI pilots or projects, or I know at 66 Degrees we have this offering called the Perpetual Innovation Engine.
Yeah.
Is it possible to say, hey, I'm going to modernize my application layer and my data estate right now, but also start to think in my business how I could start to implement agents?
Yeah,
You could do both at one time.
You can absolutely do both, and again, it's not an all in. You don't have to jump in and have everything figured out, and you can also do kind of, one side you're starting to go. Here's a very, again, going back to what I was saying earlier. If you take a pointed business problem and solution, let's just pretend we walk through someone that does supply chain today.
Mm-hmm.
They get an email, they take that, they go source that, then they go look for discounts, they do this, then they wait for approvals because it's 15% more than their normal cost. That goes an email. You think of that process as 3 to 4 days.
Yep.
And then you think of, well, what if I could automate that and fast track that? That's a great point. And, that's a solution that saves you almost 2 to 3 days on what you're doing today. So if you think of the ROI on that, absolutely go do that. And it's not really like you have to unlock all your oil and data, as I talk about,
Yep.
to get access to something that solve that problem. Meanwhile, you'll start to realize the bigger value is in your core data. That is your oil of the organization and what's important to you. That's where you can really unlock those insights, because AI will give you things and tell you things that you didn't even know yourself. It'll give you the direction of like, what should we go focus on maybe next? Because it'll enlighten you, if you will, when you see that.
It's really helpful. It sounds like a two-part strategy. It sounds like a data strategy to unlock the data estate, and then also to modernize the data estate, but then an AI strategy as well.
Yeah. The one thing I should add is it's really history repeating itself. If you think of years ago, people were, there's the cloud wave. If going back maybe 10 years, people were like, well, I don't want to get locked into one. I want to have this cloud native so I can just run on any cloud. I think it's the same thing with data. I think people are wanting to be in this position where they can have access to the data, but they can also have the freedom to be like, I'm not locked into one specific database. It could, and I can move things around. And if I want, maybe I don't run that over here. And I think for transactional systems, yes, makes sense. But what you found is over the years, databases historically have become a catch-all for everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's the business needs a copy for this. Oh, by the way, you're using this copy and you're manipulating the data, so I can't touch that. So I need my own copy. And next thing you know, you got replicants sprawled out everywhere. And it's become almost unmanageable for an organization to figure out what actually is used, what is important, what can we get rid of. And I think that's a path forward to kind of figuring how to solve that.
It's exciting, actually. It's really exciting. But it's also I think I see this. I've seen this a number of times in technology and business. That what did we do to solve a problem 10 years ago or 20 years ago, 50 years ago?
Yeah.
How do we actually take that and apply to our current problem statement?
Yeah, you're spot on. That's it. It's taking history and repeating itself, and then how do we solve it in a new way? I think the thing is now we have accelerators we didn't have before that can help us get there much faster than we could before.
Okay. So, Brian, tell me a little bit about Google's positioning in building the Agentic Enterprise. Where does Google fit, and what are some of the advantages that Google brings to an enterprise looking to evolve over time into an Agentic Enterprise?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think some could argue, like, were they building all these things for all the stars to align at one point in time, or did it just magically fall into this place eventually? And the reality is, they do have the full stack. And I'm not talking about, TPUs and their data centers. I'm talking about, if you look at their tooling, you have Gemini Enterprise. That's great. And then you have that for the reasoning. And then you've got the Vertex AI orchestration layer.
Mm-hmm. And
you look at BigQuery for the data logic, right? Going back to what's important, you have to have the data and you have to have it accessible. Well, you got that with BigQuery. And then you go back to the Vertex models. They've had that out there for years. I remember we announced it years ago when I was there, and it was like, what is this concept that we have? But we knew at that time, leaders knew that it was going to be important that there's an open standard, like there's a place for this handling the orchestration as people start to adopt this, and where do they have these things and where do they want to do them? And I think the most important thing I think plays out is that Google's notorious for open standards. So now you don't have to worry about your agents can't talk to their agents. So if you want your Salesforce agent to talk to another agent, that's you can do that. And that's really the ultimate stack. If you think about it, top down, you're going, all right, well, they've got everything and it's available and I'm not locked in. and it's open, and I can also integrate my other agents. And that's what, to me, that's what makes it special.
It's very clear. I mean, you have your chips, you have your cloud infrastructure, then you have your data platform that you can host this data on, and you have your AI tooling as well. And then to your point, it's open, so you can build agents that talk to others. That's the worst, right? Is that you build agents in your organization and they can't interact. And I've seen this with customers, is that, you look at a quick serve restaurant and they want to interact with some agents from some of their other suppliers. That enables that organization to be in an agentic enterprise.
Could you imagine having to build a whole other stack just for that piece, and then they couldn't even talk to each other, right? It's almost
it wouldn't be valuable.
It's like, imagine your employees that couldn't communicate with each other.
It's exactly right. Whereas that agent is siloed in your organization, it's has less value, significantly less value.
Right. And then I think the more important thing, to go back, some people lose sight of the importance of Vertex and AI. It's like, that's the orchestration layer, because you also can't have just like, hey, go figure out how to talk to each other and do all, it's like you need something there, some tooling and something built in place to allow and enable that.
Absolutely. So tell me a little bit that I understand Google builds great technology. And to your point, I think they had great foresight into how do you build the bottom to top stack to offer customers to build an AI into their organizations and build agents over time. What role does a partner like 66 Degrees play in helping build agents, but also helping build industry solutions that, if Google is the great technology to allow this data modernization and build the data estate in the cloud, how do you get over to, where does the partner play in that?
Yeah, it's funny because it's not, it's definitely not, here's software thing you can just go install and do. And we also, we talk about it all the time, but being data is the most important. So that's where, a partner is going to have to come in and help you figure out, how do you set yourself up to be successful in the orchestration layer from the agentic AI modernization? How do I enable these curated, experiences with agents in our environment, which again, you're going to need some help there building that and getting things set up the right way. Data is the most important. Going back to, paradigm, which is what we've developed. We really saw this need of going, hey, how do we help modernize and get this code refactored off of this system again to get it available for an agentic AI said solution is a whole different beast, right? And so that's where I would say you need someone to help with that data, the orchestration layer, and actually to put the framework. And it can't be foolish enough not to mention other important things like governance. And how do you put controls in place from a security perspective? Like, those are all really important. And I think that's where a partner comes in to help you understand, like, you don't just deploy it out in the wild and go, hey, it's going to be great. And you're going to need to put the structure in place to make that, successful. It's not, you can't just go say, hey, let's install software and hire some people and we'll go make this work. You really need experts in the industry that are working closely with Google and the ecosystem, but they're also building the rest of that out on the other side, which is what we're doing.
It makes a lot of sense. So Google really provides great tools and great solutions. Yeah. But it's the partner to build it into an organization, to have the understanding of, if you're my client, to have the understanding of what's going on in your organization, and what is it, what are the legacy applications, what is the legacy data estate, and then what are you trying to do with that data? And then to your point, governance is, how do I actually have the guardrails to make sure that my agents aren't acting out of their lane?
And I think, the one thing I think people forget is that we're blessed with the Google technology, not because they built it, thinking the enterprise needs it. They built it for Google scale and made it readily available for customers to consume. And so that's the thing. They're not building the legacy infrastructure. If you think of what kind of database stores multiple copies of the internet and has it highly searchable and scalable, there wasn't anything. So they would build that solution out that solved for them. Now they make it available. So then there's this gap of how do you get from where you are today when it's that time to go use these tooling, the toolings, the databases, the apps, everything from Google. That's where the gap is. That's where you have to figure out how do you connect those two and marry them up. To your point, Google's notorious for building amazing things and show you amazing insights, but as an organization, you kind of go, all right, well, what do I do with that? Right.
Yeah.
That's where we come in and help support that.
It's clear. How does that support my organization?
Right.
So you just laid out a gap between legacy applications, sometimes on the mainframe, sometimes co-located, sometimes in an early version of the cloud.
Right.
And then here's the AI tools. You look at Gemini Enterprise, you look at Vertex that's sitting over in Google Cloud. I think as a partner, we've seen that there's a gap there. And oftentimes, historically, we've stepped in and provided professional services. So in 2026, we're rolling out a solution called Paradigm. Could you explain a little bit about what the product does and helping customers close this gap that we've just laid out?
Yeah, it's really, call it our version of the agentic framework of like, what are we solving for? What customer pain points are we solving for? And what are we doing from a market perspective of what we believe we're going to go address a common problem? So if you take the first one that we're putting in Paradigm is the data modernization stack, and it's going to be agents helping to refactor your data solutions. Pick whatever poison you want. Mm-hmm. We can do that. But the point is like, this isn't what used to take, arguably you couldn't even achieve. Mm-hmm. To be fair, like as a previous hands-on keyboard developer, you're taking stuff from pre Y2K, and you're having to, how am I going to modernize and refactor that? And so that's the first thing we're working on is like, how do you help solve for the legacy solutions or something that you just want to modernize or get accessible data for the AI world? Like that's what we're doing today, which is building out the framework to make that, enable that.
It's exciting. And it should, I'm assuming it should accelerate or reduce the time.
Oh yeah.
Because I've met customers, Brian, where, if they have a legacy, legacy set of databases and DB2 databases, that this can at times take 2-3 years to migrate and move over. I'm assuming the time should compress over time.
The time is absolutely compressed. I think the funny thing is if I, go back to my previous life before Google, it wasn't even time. It was the financial risk to the business. This ran your core business systems, right? That's how you adjudicated claims. That's how you got paid. And so risking taking those systems down or having an impact or an outage just was not a risk that the business was willing to take. Why? Because they didn't have the insights or intelligence to even understand what the functions were doing or what systems were actually talking to which. They didn't have the confidence level. I think now it gives you this confidence level, but then also does execute. To your point, it tightens that timeline, sometimes 70 to 80%. And there's still the human in the loop. There's still eyes on keyboard and making sure validation check out that you're not just saying, well, we're going to assume it all worked and AI is going to solve all the problems. But it really is accelerating all the manual activities. It's under, giving you insights into the code. It's actually funny. It's actually refactoring the code to be written more efficiently. I had myself some code that I analyzed the other day that I had written years ago. And it literally said it was a godlike feature, meaning it controlled too many things, decouple it, separate the services, which is all good, logic that you'd want to adhere to. And so it's definitely doing a lot more than that, right? But it is solving for the, 70 to 80%, I would say, is what I've seen is accelerated. But I think the most important thing is the confidence level that it's giving.
That's really clear, and it's a great reminder that it's the speed, but also the risk mitigation over time. So Brian, my last question here for you is, if there's a client you're sitting in front of and saying, hey, Brian, I've heard a lot about this agentic modernization, and I want to build the agentic enterprise, and we've talked about data estate, we've talked about working with Google, working with 66 Degrees. Where do I begin? What is the first thing I start with? How do I dip my foot in the water first to set myself up to do it quickly, but also to do it correctly, so I can actually set my organization up for scale and long-term success?
My first advice would be start now.
Okay.
Maybe do something. I think too many people try to get everything, the stars align. We got to figure all of these things out. And the reality is the needle's moving every day. You don't know what you don't know. And if you haven't tried anything, you surely aren't going to be able to know how to take a direction from there.
Yep.
I think engaging with us, helping us, or letting us help you to understand where you're at in your journey, and then maybe kind of give you here's the steps to getting to where you need to get to based on the, where your goals ultimately are. I kind of use this analogy of a ladder, like what rung do you want to be on, right? We could definitely build you out a 3 to 5 year roadmap, full-fledged, reinvent your entire business. But the reality is, I think there's some low-hanging fruit that you can start doing today, and we've got the frameworks to put in place where you can start consuming tomorrow, arguably. Then we start to uncover, like, how is your data today? Let's do an assessment to understand, is it actually available? Is it accessible? Because those two things are critical to get started, and then also understand where your data sits today and how is it, is it available and ready? Because you need to start working on that yesterday, arguably, to move forward.
Yeah, what I hear you saying is don't let perfection stand in the way of progress.
Yeah.
Start today. Don't lose today.
Yes, exactly. Because the market's moving too fast. Technology's moving too fast. Going back to what we talked about earlier, 2 years ago, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. And it's changing arguably quarter over quarter, new things are coming out. And so you don't want to be like, well, I'll wait for the next big thing to come out, because you're going to be sitting flat-footed and you've done nothing.
Yep.
And so if you're going to do anything, start working on getting that data harmonized so that it's consumable and usable.
Fantastic. Is there anything else you'd like to share?
No.
Okay.
No.
I think it was awesome.
Yeah.
So it was really
good.
good. So thanks for joining.